Thank God. Actually, I was studying in class today about miracles, so I'm not going to say it's a miracle, just based off what I've learned today. Will, welcome to Casual Catholic Conversations.
Thank you.
For like the second time.
The second time.
And I will say that the first time stuffed up in recording, so it's okay. we got it right. And also, just a bit of a disclaimer, and my producer reminded me to say this. Thank you, James. Alters and I have not had like a breakup. Alters is just busy.
Yeah, there's not enough money involved.
Yeah. We weren't paying him enough, and he decided to walk away. He's going to start his own. What was he going to call it?
Casual Protestant conversations.
That'd be good.
That's not bad. CPC.
But that's not like a Soviet secret police.
Yeah. What is a Protestant as well?
What is a Protestant?
Yeah, it was a good. There was a good philosophical thing that came up. Is like, how can you define what is a Protestant, what is a Christian? Because there is such diversity to belief that it would be almost unlikely to find anything that they actually have in common.
Within the Protestant denominations?
Within Protestant denominations.
I agree with that 100%.
Because you've got someone like the Mormons, which don't even sort of believe in a unique divinity of Christ, which is quite central to what you would think is to be a Christian, but they can still call themselves Christian without having that.
Yeah, but you wouldn't classify Mormons as Christians. Them and Jehovah's Witnesses, you wouldn't classify them as Christians. Look, a fundamental, and this is a cracker start to this conversation, by the way, but a fundamental dogma, or the fundamental dogma of Christianity is the divinity of Christ. If you don't have that, everything else is useless.
So you'd sort of put them in the sort of the Jewish Islamic realm of Abrahamic, but not, yeah,
exactly right.
Actually, that makes perfect sense, because they would sort of they largely would go along with most things we have to say, accepting the divinity of Christ.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
And the Trinity. I read on I think it was the Jehovah's Witness website, I think, that they don't even affirm the divinity of the Holy Spirit either.
No, they're quite interesting. I walked past them one day, because they don't door knock anymore. They do the "we're here, come talk to us," which I think is a much better approach anyway. Yeah. But I've never ever seen anyone talk to them having said that. But I was wanting to go up to them, but I was like, I don't actually know what they believe. So I walked past them. I knew I was going to walk back. So I listened. I quickly found a podcast from Trent Horn talking about Jehovah's Witness. And I was like, okay, I'm going to listen to this. But I ended up getting so engrossed in the podcast that I completely walked past them on the way back. But it was really interesting, because it's sort of it's one of those things that, because has anyone actually ever invited them in? So what do they believe?
Can I just say as well, that's such a good point, bro, because I feel like we should be inviting them in more often, just to be able to sit down and have a chat with them. Yeah. By the way, if there's any Jehovah's Witnesses that want to come on Triple C, you're more than welcome. Would love to have you.
They're really interesting as well. They've got their sort of official publication, which is Watchtower, which has sort of, at the start had sort of all these sort of doomsday predictions of when the world was going to end. Like that's kind of their thing, their niche in a way. And I remember growing up, we had one guy who he was Jehovah's Witness. Whenever we did Christmas carols in the school band, he had to leave. Whenever we celebrated a birthday in class, he had to leave the class. Like, it's pretty full on in the way
as well.
Birthdays, because they sort of recognise, not completely incorrectly, but there is a pagan root to these celebrations. And I think
so they reject it in its entirety. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so they sort of reject that, which I think is like, you can look at that in some case, but you can also see that like the reason that we had these celebrations, particularly associated with pagan festivals, I believe historically, is so that they could celebrate without being too distinct in times where there were persecution of.
By the way, can you tell he's been on before, James? We haven't even gotten into his story. We just started on Jehovah's Witnesses.
He knows what to do.
Yeah, he knows what to do. It's great.
I think a good way to do this is to have people on for an entire episode, and then at the end just tell them, we're not going to use any of that.
It's all useless.
That'd be awesome. Okay, Will, let's get started into your story, bro.
Sure.
Because we spoke about it last time.
Yep.
But now I probably will have more questions this time, which is awesome.
That's good.
So firstly, you were baptized into the Maronite faith last year.
Yep, 11 months ago. 4 days ago, it was 11 months ago. So I'm pretty fresh, I'm pretty new. There's there's 2-year-olds who are walking around who are technically more Catholic than I am in their history.
In terms of years and quantity.
Yeah, I was talking to someone about this as well, because they were like, "How's your prayer life, Will?" And I was like, to be honest, it's not that good, but at the same time, like, is the prayer life of a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old that good? You know, so that's sort of my excuse.
That's a great way of looking at it, bro. That's a great way.
In a spiritual sense, I'm 1-year-old, you know, so.
Will's turning 1.
I'm turning 1 in September 30. October 30,
October 30.
Rather.
Yes. We are in October now. Okay, so let's get started on your story.
Yep.
Prior to Catholicism,
Yep.
and I asked you this last time, I'll say, what were you?
I was a pretty blank slate. You wouldn't call me anything. I wasn't baptized in anything. I wasn't raised in any particular culture. We went to church once as a family from the age of 0 to 18, which I think is even more unique in itself than most people who would, like, I think even people who would describe themselves as having a pretty agnostic upbringing would say, oh, but we went to church during these times. We did Easter or we did Christmas or something like that, sort of almost merely as a tradition without the association of it. But we literally did none of that. We did one Church of England Mass Thanksgiving in probably like 2006, 2007 when I would have been like 10, 11 years old. And I remember how boring it was. I couldn't stand it. I thought it was horrible. So that was sort of my experience of church. So yeah, my grandma had been Catholic, my mum's mum, and very Catholic. Like Sunday every week, you know, she'd always go to church, but she didn't, you know, like if you went to her house, I can't really remember like there being a cross or a, Mary or anything like that. But we sort of knew that she was church, but that was kind of like what grandma did more than anything else. It wasn't like, I never asked her any questions about it.
Why was the Church of England service, just out of curiosity, why was it boring?
So I think it was because like it was, it's going to sound bad because it was like a Catholic mass. It was very like there were hymns. There was like, I didn't really understand what was going on. And I think that's the thing as well. Like even, I suppose if you've got parents who you can lean on and you can be like, what's going on here? They might be able to have a really good explanation if they've been brought up the faith. But my parents, they're sort of going like, I don't know. It's just sort of the way it is. And I think that's something that a lot of people would walk into a Catholic mass and if they don't understand what's going on, they could very easily go like, what is this? Why are we doing all this? There's a lot of words and it doesn't make a lot of sense, you know. And I think that when you break it down, you go, oh, there is so much meaning behind everything.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But if you don't know any of that meaning, it's very easy to walk in there and just see absolutely no meaning at all.
Was that your same reaction with your first Maronite Mass?
No, first Maronite Mass was more so like freaking out or being a bit more overwhelmed by it because I was trying to pay attention because I would have been like 21 or 22 years old. So I was trying to understand what was going on. I was trying to follow along. So it wasn't boredom by any stretch of the imagination. It was like the opposite of being like overwhelmed and like, what is going on and oh my goodness. And yeah, I didn't really, I wouldn't say I had much of an understanding of the elements behind everything, but it was sort of, I was trying to take in as much as possible. But having said that, I can't remember almost any part of the liturgy. I couldn't tell you what the homily was about. I just remember being like really overwhelmed.
Because I remember when I did a talk on the Maronite Mass and I only focused on one part of it. It's quite astonishing how much is only like in the epiclesis, the invocation of the Holy Spirit. When the priest breaks the body. Which
I don't think the Roman Catholics don't really do the epiclesis anymore, do they? I think they might have once upon a time, but they don't do it in the same way that we do, at least in the definitive way that we do it.
Yeah, I don't know because I haven't been to a Roman Catholic Mass in a while. Yeah, it's the last time I went was I think it was the early times of the relationship with Giselle, and we went to the one in Liverpool. But look, and once again, I'm not trying to say like that Mass is less valid. All I'm trying to say is I've actually learned to appreciate the Divine Renovation program more when it stresses amazing hymns during Mass and just making it a beautiful experience.
Yeah,
Pope Benedict actually says Mass should be like the greatest show you ever witnessed. Yeah. Or something along those lines.
I think that's what we've forgotten as well, and you can really tell. I think there's sometimes you see like a priest is really going through the motions.
Oh, absolutely.
And like it's hard to blame them. Like it's, if you think about the last 7 days, they've been doing a mass at least once every single day for that.
Yeah.
Like it's positive. Like it's fair enough that there's sort of a bit of fatigue there, but I think at the same time, like, you know, we've got to think about, and I think that think about this when I altar serve, is that like it's not a performance, but we are trying to showcase to other people what is going on. And we're trying to be like, I remember I was talking to you like why I have my hands together in like a prayerful thing. It's because, you know, during the prayer when we start, I can't remember the exact wording, but it's essentially saying like, let us be an example. Let us be a visual witness to what is going on as altar servers, you know? And so I try in the way that I do everything to be reverent, to be all these different things, you know, not really for myself, but more so to showcase that to other people, you know, of what we're there for and what we're trying to do and what we're trying to order ourselves towards.
I'm hoping they send back the rubrics sooner rather than later for the Maronite Mass, so we actually know step by step what we're doing. Anyways, let's get back to your story.
Yes.
So, I'm trying to think where's a good part to start. So, during high school,
Yes.
you went to a Christian school.
I went to a non-denominational Christian high school.
Yeah. Anything there?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I'd say that, like, from my experience of high school, faith-wise, versus people I've talked to who've gone to Catholic schools, a wide variety of Catholic schools, I would say that mine was one of the best as far as like faith and faith
Oh
formation.
wow! Thank God. Okay,
So,
yeah.
which is really good. And like I would compare, I would say that the schools that I've heard that get close to what I sort of had would be like your Redfield, your Tangaras, like the Pirate schools.
Oh yeah.
Like the Pirate
yeah.
schools are really good at that kind of stuff. Whereas I think that having said that, the Catholic schools are really good, which the Anglican churches don't get. The Anglican schools don't get this, and they're going through a real hard time for it at the moment. But the Catholic schools have always worn on their sleeve that we are Catholic schools. We're not Catholics running schools. We're not Catholics who do these. We are Catholic schools. So there is going to be mass. There is going to be prayer, all these different things. So I've got friends who went through like having no connection to the faith, but having a very vivid understanding that when they go to school, there will be prayer before class, there will be mass, all these different things. The Anglicans kind of have a really confused relationship with it at the moment, and they're struggling now because now a lot of their schools, especially in the Sydney diocese, are trying to implement now, hey, we want to be really Anglican in the way that we go about these things. And so they're trying to get their principals to sign certain documents which attest to certain church teachings, and there's massive outcry about it. So I think it's kind of good that Catholics have always worn their heart on their sleeve of like what they are at schools, but I think they can live that out a little bit better sometimes. But yeah, I went there and it was just really good at invoking sort of that personal relationship with God and learning about, you know, God is not this far away mystical object, but someone who you can be intimate with, you can have a relationship with. And that was a really beautiful thing and a really attractive thing. And so I sort of discovered the, you know, the flame of what would become my faith at high school, which I think is a very rare thing for a lot of people, or at least people I know. Look, I you know, you go to a Christian high school, a lot of people will, you know, be Christian while they're there and then leave it the second they leave, you know, which is fair enough. But yeah, I really found that school really did kindle a lot of things in a lot of people.
So, after high school, what happened to you?
I really fell off the track. So like in year 12, I'd gotten to the point where I was like not really going to church, or going to any sort of, I'd go to youth sometimes on a Friday night. But you know, and I probably would have called myself a Christian. Like I was leading a Bible study with some other boys during year 12. But like the second I left high school was my only connection to the faith. So the second I left high school, it severed. And so, you know, and plus like there's a lot of things on offer. Like I turned 18 a few weeks after I graduated high school. So, you know, a lot of things would have
popped up, yeah.
It's like everything comes at once. So, you know, you can drink now, you're going out, there's girls, there's all these different things. So I sort of, you know, really fell off the bandwagon for a little bit there. And, yeah, first year of university, I kind of really fell away from the faith. I wouldn't say it was extinct. I was going to say extinguished entirely.
Yeah, that's all right.
But there was still something there, but it was just like, you know, it was like the thing of, you know, the light under the bushel. You know, it wasn't there to be seen.
Let's build off that point a bit more, because I had the same exact experience.
So many people I've talked to, particularly boys, young men, have the same experience where it's like, you know, you're unbridled. You know, your whole childhood has been a very bridled experience of the faith for, you know, most people. It's like you go to mass because your parents go to, you go to youth because your parents want you to go, you know, and then suddenly you get to 18 and your parents really take the reins off and say, you know, in a lot of cases, you're the adult now, you can make all these decisions. And, or at least you've got time where you're away from your parents, where even if, you know, they can't control certain decisions that you make. And so you know, and
is it almost, I'm trying to word it in my head. It's almost like it's too much at once.
Yeah, and you want to, you kind of want to have a taste of everything as well, you know. And it's I don't want to say it's natural, but I think there's sort of an inbuilt desire in most people to, you know, to explore and different things like that. And like, you know, I mean, we're drinking now. Like there is an element to alcohol which makes you feel good. There's an element to all these other things that make you feel good. As a married man, I'm sure you could say there are sexual things that make you feel good. You know,
absolutely.
Like there's all these things that we have which which make us feel good, which make us feel fulfilled to an extent, you know. So I think it's quite natural that we sort of explore that. We get a first taste of it, and we realize, you know, we get pleasure out of these things. One of the best quotes I ever heard was that sort of in society we've lost track of, we're not seeking happiness anymore, we're seeking pleasure.
Yeah.
The problem with pleasure is it's really brief, and it feels good in that moment, but then we want more of it. And so we've got to keep looking for it in other places. Whereas I think that, you know, to find happiness is a lot more about finding contentness, you know, and to find happiness in what is, not what could be. Whereas pleasure is sort of, you know, really finding happiness in what could be and what the next could be.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're absolutely spot on. That's why I think teens is such an important thing. The formation of teens is such an important thing but at the same time, and I kind of mentioned this with Simon, I'm going to mention this with you. I think there's a stigma that when you mention alcohol, there's this thing with alcohol and Christianity, it's like they're mutually exclusive things.
Yeah.
I don't know where it's come from, but the moment that you say, yeah, I'm Maronite Catholic, I go to Mass all the time. But if somebody sees you with alcohol in your hand, it's like you've committed the most mortal of mortal sins.
Yeah.
And I think that we've done it wrong in trying to just avoid it.
Yeah.
It's not really talking about it.
That attitude is it's a very Australian attitude. It's a very English attitude as well. So there was a Spanish mate of mine who was saying that first time he came to Australia, he's like, your relationship with alcohol is so weird.
Yeah.
I said, what do you mean? And he goes, you guys drink to get smashed.
Yeah.
And that's the culture. That's the drinking culture. He said, in Spain, you go out, you have a few drinks, but if you ever get to that point, it's like your night is ruined. Like that's the mentality. If you get to that point, your night is ruined. Like why would you be vomiting in the gutter? Why do you want to do these things? Like a good night is where you're buzzed, you're energized, you're all these things, but you're still in control. That's a good night. So I think that's why that we have, you know, I think those cultures that associate a real strong negativity with alcohol. And look, alcohol is something that we have to be really careful about. But at the same time, we look to it like in our faith, there is an element where alcohol is something which is important. You know, the wine is consecrated. The first miracle involves alcohol, and it's not making less of it, it's making more of it. So, you know, so I think we've got to look at these things, that there obviously is something there that is good. I think alcohol can be a great social lubricant. It can be all these different things, but you know, I think that at the same time, I think that it's like in our context, the reason it's so stigmatized is because we've absolutely butchered what it is and what it can do.
That's actually a valid point. I think that's spot on, because when you look at history, alcohol didn't always have that. Alcohol had like this pub group kind of stigma to it, friendship kind of mentality to it. Like when you even think about C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien sitting around, having a whiskey, chilling out, it's eventually
and doing great things in that context as well.
Awesome
not being
bro.
drunk, like actually having really stigmatizing conversations. Like that's obviously where C.S. Lewis's faith came from.
Absolutely,
bro. From that. Yeah. So you know there are really fruitful things that can come from it. But I think that we sort of do need to take a step back and realize that it's not a bad thing, but it can be a gateway to sin. And it's a very strong gateway to sin. You know,
that's why I think teen formation is good, because avoiding it doesn't help, because eventually these teens, when they, even before 18, but they're going to be exposed to it, so we need to be speaking about it. But having this Puritan mentality of avoiding it altogether doesn't make it good either.
No.
So in other words, it's achieving that balance and making them realize you can still have an enjoyable time with alcohol.
I think
in a very morally justified way. Yeah.
Good teens faith formation is really important as well, because when people fall off that bandwagon, they realize there's something to come back to. You know, if they've never had that in the first place, then they will sort of look around for something else. They'll go, this isn't making me happy, but maybe this could make me happy, or maybe I'd feel more fulfilled there. Whereas I think maybe some people who've been brought up in the faith have had a really good formation experience in teens, even if they've run away from that with everything possible. When they do get hurt, when they do get sad, when they do get upset, when they do sort of lose all that, they can maybe look back and go, I was happy then, or I did enjoy that, or I look at my parents and they're happy, or I look at my cousins and they're happy, or I look at this person, I know that they're happy when they're doing that. And it's something that you can fall back on without having to, you know, relearn everything from scratch.
Dude, like, I swear, I'm absolutely agree with you. You know, when I discovered, I feel like I went kind of, I went loose there, but when I discovered like the amazing theology of our faith, I was like, man, why wasn't I taught this when I was younger? Like, this is just astonishing. This is great stuff. It's mind-blowing. And If I had it when I was younger, I don't know whether or not it would have assisted me in my earlier years, but nonetheless, I can definitely relate back to you. I would have looked back to it and think, man, I'm miserable now. What can I go back to uplift myself? Anyways, that was a great kind of interlude into the next bit. So, you went off the rails. Now, we all know the story. You were invited to a Maronite mass by one of our parishioners. I don't know if we want to name
Yeah,
it.
I got to go a few steps back from that though.
There's another point. There's a different point. Okay.
There's a few different things before that. So I'd sort of done 1 year of university and was feeling fine and happy and different things like that. Although having said that, I had some negative experiences associated with like hookup culture and things like that had put me off from that for a little while. So it'd been sort of like the start of that year, I had sort of a bad experience that I was like, I felt gross. I felt bad. I felt like I just used someone. And I very clearly felt that. And so coming to the end of that year, not having anything to really attach myself to, but just knowing that, hang on, like that wasn't really making me happy anymore. Then I had two of my last two remaining grandparents died within a very quick time frame of each other. So my dad's dad and my mum's mum. And my dad had always had a very close relationship with his dad. My mum had a very close relationship with her mum.
So that would have worked out.
So suddenly, like my whole life, my rock had been my parents. Very blessed that I've had two parents who loved each other and loved us. That's you talk about privilege in life. That is one of the main privileges in life, that you have two parents. It doesn't matter about anything else. If you've got two parents who love each other and love you, you are doing really, really well in life.
Absolutely.
So that had been my rock, and it had been a good rock, and it was a stable rock. But suddenly, that was shattered because my mum was trying to deal with the death of her mum, and my dad was trying to deal with the death of his dad. So in my grief, I had no one to really lean on during that time, and it wasn't for their own fault. Like they had things to deal with, and so for the first time in a long time, I just started praying because I needed something else, and I just needed to sink into something else, and I got a lot of comfort from that, and then. Just, that was the end of first year of university, start of second year of uni. I met a Maronite girl at an orientation lecture who would go on to be my godmother. And funnily enough, we've sort of traced this back. If we weren't in that same part of the room at the same time on the same night, we never would have met each other. It was just like, it's astonishing to think that like what has become the most important friendship in my life and in my faith journey was so fleeting that it just so happened we were next to each other at this event. We never would have met it, like we'd never had a class. We never had a class together after that. We never had any interaction beyond that. Like we wouldn't have. It just would not have happened. It was just serendipitous that we're in the same room at the same time. And a few weeks after I met her, I met Selena, who's the parishioner here, who was the one who eventually invited me to mass here. So, and I think through knowing those people, the first one, the one who was my godmother, she wore her faith really on her sleeve. And as part of being friends with her, it's like, hey, we're going to do some Catholic things, Hey, do you want to hang out on Friday? Yep, I'd love to. Let's go get dinner. That sounds good. By the way, we're going to go to this grotto beforehand. We're going to go pray there. And then we can go to dinner afterwards, And then after dinner, we might go to St. Michael's or Belfield or somewhere where the church is open and just go sit there. And it was kind of like, it sort of came along with the territory of being friends with her. But it was really good because, as someone who'd had that faith had been rekindled a little bit. I now had somewhere where I could be a bit of an outlet for that. I could have somewhere where I could go to pray. And I sort of had my first introduction to Catholicism. I'd gone my whole life, even though my grandma was Catholic, not really knowing what a Catholic was or what Catholics do or what made them unique. I sort of always just thought of them as another denomination of Christianity, and there was no reason to think that they were any more important than anyone else. There was no reason to think they were doing anything different than anyone else. I hadn't had that upbringing that some Protestants have, which is that Catholic bad, Catholic evil. I'd never had that. Catholic was very neutral because I knew next to nothing about it. So getting to learn about it was really good. And it was a really beautiful way of getting to learn it as well, because I'd sort of always felt a lot more comfortable in silent reverence than I had with, active praise and worship, which had been my experience through high school of going to the local Pentecostal church for Friday nights. Like Hillsong's the big Pentecostal church, but essentially the second biggest one is called C3. It's Christian City Church.
I've been seeing them everywhere.
Yeah.
I've been seeing them everywhere.
There's one, it's very funny. There's one in Pennant Hills and Cherrybrook, they're like 1 kilometre apart. There's like two of them that are so close to each other.
Isn't there one at Silverwater as well?
There's one at Silverwater as well. Yeah. So funnily enough, the Silverwater one, the youth pastor, when I was going through youth there, is now he was the senior pastor there, and now he's the pastor of the whole thing. But they're really big as well. Like there are a lot of places across Australia. There's somewhere else. But that was their main campus that I was going to in Oxford Falls, which is like, it's not quite Hillsong, but it's pretty close. Like it's a big auditorium. It's all these different things. And I enjoyed myself there, but I wouldn't say that it was feeling very spiritual. But I always felt a lot more spiritual in the silence, in the reverence, in the going to the grottos, in the doing all these things. And we were praying the rosary, and I didn't really have a connection to the actual rosary itself, but I still felt a reverence and things like that. So there was sort of a slowly starting to fall in love with, I wouldn't say Catholicism in general, but just the way of Catholic, like in that sense, that specific way of Catholic worship and Catholic prayer.
By the way, your godmother got engaged last time we were on.
Yeah.
That failed in recording, so we might as well congratulate her again.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Now the wedding date's set as well, which is good. So.
Oh, thank you. God. Beautiful. Okay, great. Okay. God willing, you have a fruitful journey towards your big wedding day. All right. So, you're at Christ the Redeemer.
Yeah.
Where were you living when you first were coming?
When I was first coming here, I was living on the Northern Beaches.
How long was it taking you to get down
It
there?
was about 45 minutes each way.
Wow.
So that was a real commitment.
With or without tolls?
I used to be with tolls, and then I got my bill back after a year, and I spent thousands of dollars on tolls.
I was going to say, like, that would have
coming
been
to
ridiculous.
church, so I was like, okay, I need to find a different way to get here. But because I got invited to CTR, and I'd only been to Mass once before, which was the first time at Our Lady, and it was funny. The first few times I was coming to Mass, I was lying to my parents about where I was going. I was saying, "Oh, I'm going to hang out with this friend, or I'm going to do this. I'm going to go do drugs or something like that." You know, like anything except for church. You know, and it wasn't because they were going to disapprove, but I just knew that if I said where I was going, there would be a million questions. And I think that I didn't even know the answer to the questions of like, why are you going? What's happening? Like, I didn't know. So it was just like, better off not to do the questions. And so it was probably like, you know, first 8 or 9, 10 times that I was going, or I said I was going somewhere else. So yeah, I'd drive 45 minutes from the Northern Beaches to go to Mass, and I'd sit there, and I couldn't receive the sacraments, but I would sit there and I'd sort of absorb everything for an hour and 15 minutes, and then, you know, we'd go out to dinner afterwards, and I was really enjoying meeting all the people. And I'd say that at a point where I was invited, there had been a pretty strong, my spirituality had gotten to a point where I was ready to make a commitment somewhere, I'd say. Like I was ready to find my church or find a church. And I would still say at that point, it wasn't the Catholic Church, but through sitting through the homilies and just that first year or two, learning about the Mass and engrossing myself in Catholic theology, like I fell in love. That's the best way to say it. Like I just fell in love. And it, you know, it definitely wasn't love at first sight, but I just really started to fall in love with it. And, you know, from great homilies from Monsignor Shora to, you know, just the beautiful liturgy and the reverence and the what was going on, and my growing and understanding of that it's hard to say what I would do if God said you can start from the beginning and pick your journey. You know, geez, it'd be so much easier to be cradle Catholic. But it's been really beautiful having the love affair and falling in love and getting to do that as my own choice. And that's something my parents had always said to us. It's like, you know, we didn't get baptized as kids because they were really determined that, you know, they wanted us to choose, you know. And there's a real beauty to that. Having said that, the second my kids are born, we're taking them to get baptized.
No questions.
But at the same time, I think there's a real beauty to having that, and to getting to choose, and to having a baptism which is witnessed by people who know you, understand understand what the journey's been, and all these different things.
Absolutely. Although I can definitely see people who are baptized later in life, you can definitely see the fire.
Yeah, there's a fire, there's a zeal, because I think in most cases they've had to give up something.
Absolutely.
They've had to forsake something. And even if it's like, for me, it hasn't been giving up much, but like there's an awkwardness there. There's a trickiness sometimes of trying to explain.
Bless you, bro.
Bless you, my brother. That was a big
You're good, okay? There's paper towels here, by the way, if you need.
There's sometimes just like a trickiness or an awkwardness or something like that. Like I remember I was trying to talk to my family about like, you know, Catholic teaching on sex and things like that, and sort of no contraception and things like that. And so my dad used the euphemism like, so can you hop off the station before? And I was like, it took me a moment to realize what he was getting at. I was like, oh, no.
Yeah.
Like, no. And it was kind of a real, you know, there's just sometimes a bit of a barrier to understanding and things like that. And it's...
But you know what? There's even Catholics that have that struggle.
there's a majority of Catholics
Yeah,
that
that's
struggle
it.
with that, you know.
That's-
And
It
it's
makes me
fair
think.
enough. Like I think that I'm really blessed in my journey that I've had access to really good catechesis and really good theology. And maybe going back 20 years with the internet in its infancy, or even further back from that with no internet at all, it'll be really hard because I think a lot of times you're relying on the local priest to give you a satisfying answer, or you're relying on, you know, something like that. You know, you're relying on what is immediately there. Whereas, you know, we're so blessed that we have access to the world of really good apologetics, and
You know,
that I can bring up the best apologetics in the world on my phone and listen to them. in
Oh, absolutely.
10
In a hobby.
seconds.
We are definitely blessed, and that's why it just makes me think, do we really... Sorry, am I getting too loud? You look like you're getting bothered by my voice. It's like...
Do both.
You know what you look like, James? You look like my dad trying to sleep.
It's that pose, like
What's
a
he
straight
so
pose.
Yeah. Anyways, it just makes me think we don't really have many excuses anymore because we've got a whole lot of resources, very easily accessible. But in saying that, I definitely agree with you with in the past how difficult it would have been and being reliant on the priest. And it still kind of occurs now, even when you look through things, it's going to sound pretty funny, even when you look through Reddit and you're going through these Catholic forums and there's people that are asking their priests questions. They're not being satisfied, so they go into Reddit and thank you, James. They go into Reddit and they're asking people online these questions. My priest, I asked him this question, not satisfying, can you give me an answer? And they're getting these answers there. So I think right now the next step in our journey isn't even necessarily just straight catechesis. I think it's about directing people towards the right resources.
Yeah.
Telling them this is where you can find your answers.
And I think it's about, as well, introducing people to the Catholic Church as well. Like, we've kind of got to get out there, and now we've got to, like, the back end's really, really good. Like, we're all sorted, everything's good. You know, we've got a lot. We've got a lot to offer. B, we can educate people really, really well now. I think it's about like getting out there and just being really, you know,
Really visible.
really visible.
I get what you mean. Yeah.
And also showing people that, like, Catholicism has different access points.
Oh,
You know, like
yes.
it's if you come from a charismatic tradition like Pentecostalism, we've got a charismatic movement within the church.
Absolutely.
You know, which is fully embraced by the church as well.
Absolutely.
So great, do that. If you're coming from an Anglican denomination and you really like the Anglican traditions and the Anglican liturgy, we've got personal ordinariates. We've got literally a specific thing set up for you to come into the Catholic Church to be in full communion while retaining your tradition.
Absolutely.
You know, with Orthodoxy, I would say that, I'm just trying to think, maybe there's one or two exceptions. I can't think off the top of my head. For every single Orthodoxy, we have an Eastern Catholic Church equivalent. So you can come and take, yes,
Yes, Jason.
Every church, every Eastern Orthodox,
except the Maronites. The Maronites, we don't have an Orthodox equivalent.
Eastern Catholic Church has an Orthodox equivalent.
That's what I'm saying.
Except us.
Yeah, so I'm
The
just trying to think
closest thing we have is the Syriac Orthodox.
I'm trying to think if
Church,
it's the other way around though. Like, that's what I'm trying to think. Is it the other way around? Is there an Orthodox that doesn't have a Catholic equivalent? Which I'm not sure of. Anyways, essentially,
You'd have to look that
probably not.
up for
No,
us,
look up, yeah.
producer.
There's
Thank you.
Ukrainian, which is the same thing apparently.
And
No.
we can put that up in post-edit, can't we? Like the whole, hey, by the way, we found this.
60% of this video is getting cut out.
Little fun fact.
What the heck?
But yeah, so like there's so many different access points, and I think that, you know, you might think about Catholicism as just being, you know, maybe what you see on TV. It's like, you know, Latin Rite, all these different things, or, you know, like a
Exactly
Latin
right,
Rite
yes.
high mass, almost being done in a TLM style or something like that, where you have to be reverent, you have to be all these things, where it's like, you know, that's one thing of what we do. It's the most important thing of what we do, but it's not everything that we do. And what you can be, and like me, like my connection to the church initially, and my falling in love with the church hasn't necessarily been in the spiritual element. It's been in the knowledge and the theology element. I've fallen in love with that. And every time I see something else that is like this beautiful connection, I just go like, oh, like,
How great is that? Yeah, how
I'm in
amazing
love.
is that?
Like, I just find out something and it's like, oh, that is beautiful. And it gives it, and it, that therefore, because I was talking to someone, they were saying like, you know, you got to have the spiritual stuff, you got to have the personal connection. It's like, I see God in the beauty, and I see God in the consistency or something that is really beautiful about the church. I go, wow, like this is not our creation, you know, like, and that's where you can see it, you know, sort of, you can see it and you go, something that works really, really well, or something that is beautiful, and you go, it makes so much sense, and that is all the more reason to fall in love.
We definitely have to be more open to alternatives. A lot of times we're very stingy. A lot of the times. Not everyone. I have to admit we're getting a lot better. But I've definitely had conversations with Catholics where they're like, it has to be this.
Yeah, and you touched on divine renovation as well, and I think that's a really good starting point of like getting that openness as well. But I think the point you're probably about to touch on as well is that like we need to realize as Catholics that like what is mandatory, let us hold to that really strong and fast.
Absolutely.
But where there is room for diversity, let us celebrate wholeheartedly that diversity.
Bro, it's like when people appeal to tradition and they'll say, for example, Aquinas said this, St. Thomas Aquinas. And I love St. Thomas Aquinas. But even during St. Thomas Aquinas' time, there were traditionalists that didn't want to bar of him. They wanted to kick him out. Same with Augustine. Same with a lot of these great thinkers, a lot of these great saints that people refer back to, right? Even St. Padre Pio was pushed back against.
Yeah, quite a lot.
And the point that I'm trying to make is we don't seem to be learning from our lesson of when something seemingly new comes up, we're becoming very hesitant instead of allowing it to just naturally grow itself. Because my dad says this beautiful thing. If God doesn't will it, it's not going to work. Doesn't matter what they do. It's just not going to work. It's going to crumble on itself. Whereas if God wills for the Catholic Church, it's going to thrive. It's really as simple as that, and that's where we kind of have to maybe shift our mentality. Anyways, we've had what time is it? We're gonna apologies on the video. We've actually got something after this, but then we'll be back a bit later on doing our thing. Anyways, I want to move on to the next bit. So you're at the Maronite Catholic Mass. You're experiencing that.
Yep.
I had a question that I didn't ask you last time. I'm going to ask you now. Did you contemplate on Roman Catholicism?
I think you did ask me this question last time.
Yeah, you did.
You did?
Did I?
Yeah.
I would have sworn that I did. Because I was in the car and I was thinking, man, I really wanted to ask him
No,
that.
I remember this. I remember distinctly answering, and the answer is that, like, no, it was never really an option because I didn't really have a connection to the Roman Catholic Church. I still don't really, like, I work for the Roman Catholic Church. I still don't really feel I have much of a connection to the Roman Catholic Church, except for the fact that it is part of the universal church. I don't feel I really have any. I have maybe slightly more of a connection to the Roman Catholic Church than I would the Melkite Church, than I would the Syro-Malabar Church, than all these different things, because I work for them and I'm more familiar with the liturgy. But apart from that, like, there's no reason for me to. You might as well have said, did you consider the Melkite or the Syro-Malabar Church? It's like,
Cool.
no,
Yeah,
I didn't.
okay.
Like,
Okay, yeah.
No, because it's got it. You know, I say this to Roman Catholic friends, like, the Roman Catholic Church missed me. Like, they didn't come for me. They didn't seek after me. You know, they weren't Jesus with the lamb for me. You know, like, I never even got introduced to Roman Catholicism. You know, my experience of the church has almost been solely through the Maronite Church.
James, by the way, did you end up finding any Russian Catholic churches?
Oh yeah, there was. So what I was able to understand, I may get this wrong if there's a Russian Catholic listening, but there was. It seems like there was a portion of the Russian Orthodox that came back into communion with the Pope about 115 years ago.
Oh, there you go.
There's always some. There's always some.
There's always some.
I think it's kind of understandable as well. It's like you can only go so long without, you know, a supreme authority. You know, like, and it's
like even
I know
the
it's very
Coptic-
Russian. Not to. I mean, actually, I'm going to take that. I was going to say communism, but it's like Russia has, like, despite being communist, has always had a leader, and a very strong leader, and someone who knows who everyone, you know, that person is. So it's sort of, you know, I think it's. I'm not surprised the Russians have come back.
Have you heard Dr. Scott Hahn's reason why he didn't become Orthodox?
No, I haven't. Was it the papacy?
No.
That's interesting.
That wasn't the predominant reason.
That's most. Oh, was he saying that he didn't really feel that he fit into culturally? Like, I've heard someone say that they didn't feel that they fit in culturally to, you know, like the particular culture, because they felt it was so associated with the culture, which I laugh about because I'm like, well, that's.
Well,
I picked the wrong one. Then.
It's sort of on the right track, but and you did pick the wrong one, but whatever. He actually touched on how. Orthodox, let's call them denominations for now, even though there's another word. I'm pretty sure they call them like Orthodox rites. But anyways, they're associated with the country. They're national. So they're Russian Orthodox or they're Greek Orthodox. And Dr. Scott Hahn couldn't appease that with St. Paul's idea of the body.
Of unity.
Yeah, being unified, the unity.
Yeah.
And how Christ says a kingdom ought not to be separated against itself.
Yeah.
And you brought that up, like the supreme authority. And I just thought, you know what, that was just such a basic, common sense way of thinking about it, because it's such a valid point.
Yeah.
James, yes.
Sorry.
That's okay.
It's pretty rich for a Maronite to say that, it makes sense that a church can't be connected to a country.
I think the
We're
difference
still
being,
different, though.
I think the difference
Yeah.
being that Orthodox is uniquely connected to that culture, and that there is no unity with any culture beyond that. Like, it is so down to the culture of what it was. Whereas the Maronite Church is part of the wider Catholic Church.
We're still under the Pope.
as a
That's why, yeah.
Like, as a Catholic, it's like the top fitness first membership. You can go to any gym in Australia. So like you get the membership and you go to any gym. Whereas Orthodoxy is like you can only go to your gym.
Well, that's exactly right. Like it's like, for example, how there's many Orthodox dogmas that are Orthodox rites that they don't agree with each other.
No, they don't.
On certain dogmas, and certain Orthodox will accept us to receive communion, and then certain other Orthodox denominations won't. There's too much of a clash. Whereas us Maronite Catholics, we have the same exact dogmas as the rest of the Catholics, and we're under the Supreme Pontiff, the Pope.
Yep.
The main difference is just our traditions, our celebrations, the way we actually go about it.
And who can perform them as well. I was reading through the marriage book at work and realizing that I can really only technically be married by a Maronite priest now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, look, you can get discretion from a bishop, but it was like I didn't even understand that I just thought any Catholic priest could marry me. But it's like, no, because I think it's in Australia, it's the Melkite, Chaldean, and Syro-Malabar and Maronite Church, because we are enough of established churches that we have to get married by a priest of our own right. And
it's always interesting talking about the connection between the supremacy of the Pope, but the authority of the bishop within his region. It's always interesting talking about that balance, because people can be surprised that Pope Francis just can't come in and decide to just change things willy-nilly. He's got a lot of authority, but at the same time, our bishop has his own kind of authority as well.
And he's like
amazing.
The only Pope Francis has authority over the bishop, but not the not everything else. So I think that's
interesting.
Yeah.
And people are always shocked, like when we say Pope, they're always shocked to find out that he's Bishop of Rome.
Yeah.
But Rome was the chosen epicenter. Anyways, that's for another day, because that's just amazing to talk about there. What time is it? Just so we don't...
6:37.
We've got 15 more minutes, I reckon.
We're just going to make sure that we open up from. That's all.
Well, the thing is you kind of ended it without realizing. Like, you naturally came to an end.
A decrescendo, as it were. Is that what it is? A decrescendo?
Did we sort of?
Yeah.
Can we just keep building on the point? Because I just kind of want to bounce back and forth, because... And I don't mean to bring it back up, but the relationship between the Pope and the Bishop is always very, very interesting to me. Because us as Maronites, we have a lot of autonomy, very much a lot of autonomy, in the sense that our Mass, it only needs to get a tick of approval from Rome. That's really all it needs to do. But besides that, we can go about it. We can go about our celebrations. Then it always makes me think, can Pope Francis just one day wake up and just override it?
And that's what I've been worried about. And I talk to people about like how I view what's happening with the traditional Latin Mass and Novus Ordo. I've never been to a traditional Latin Mass. I don't particularly care. I don't have any connection to it. But I do think as a Maronite, with our own liturgy, it's a bit upsetting to hear that people who have a really strong connection with this liturgy, that's being taken away. Because I wouldn't want that for us.
Oh, absolutely.
And the arguments that are being used to take down or to give bishops the power to not have the traditional Latin Mass in their diocese, they're very easily transferable arguments to taking away the divine liturgy and taking away our liturgy. Because the whole point that they're arguing is like unity, that they want unity of liturgy within the church.
Well, that's exactly
It's like,
right.
well, that's an odd point to start from, first of all, because you've got, and I think that this is where I sometimes feel that JP2 was so good what he talked about with breathing with two lungs, the East and the West breathing with two lungs. I feel that there are times when Roman Catholics forget, hey, you guys are one of 20, like you guys are one of 20 something.
Yeah.
You're not the only church. You guys, okay, you're the majority, you're the main, you're all these different things, but you're not the only. And you sort of need to get outside. I think that we've maybe lost that mindset of appreciating that the East has to offer something. And the diversity of liturgy within a certain scope is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Like this was a mass that was licit for like 500 years, and now it's illicit in certain dioceses. It's like I really struggle to square that in a lot of ways because I see that A, it means a lot to a lot of people, and B, I think we see, like anecdotally, I think, but a lot of young people going to that mass. And
there has been, I do remember the response to it, and God willing, once we actually kind of become more secure here, I'd love to kind of do those live reactions to certain things. I do remember a Monsignor, he was on Pints with Aquinas, and he responded so beautifully. He said, look, I can understand what Pope Francis is attempting to do, but he was just completely honest. He said, it was I believe the last thing that I at least asked you personally was, did you contemplate on Roman Catholicism?
yes.
In which you just outright said
Essentially,
no. That was not happening. Essentially, that was the vibe that I got from you.
Do you know, it's a weird thing though, like having said that, if I were to become a priest, I would consider becoming a priest in the Roman Catholic Church.
Interesting. Why is that?
It's hard to explain, but I feel that as a priest, you're a father, and I think that as in my role, I would struggle to be a father to people who are of a vastly different culture to me. I can be friends with them.
Okay.
I can be a brother to them. I don't know if I can be a father to them. And I think that it's sort of, that's something that's, in the last sort of few months has been really ramming home to me that that is a father in the same way that you go home and your father is your father. And the same way we've got a father in heaven, that's our spiritual father. That's our papa. That's our, so I think I'd struggle to be a father to people who, especially a lot of people who don't speak, I can't speak their language, who I don't understand their history. I don't have that deep understanding of their culture. I can be a brother in Christ with them. I can share in their liturgy. I can be one of them. I can't father that person though.
It's very interesting. Could I say though that I think a counter perspective could also be, you could possibly be the difference that is required in order to almost balance out our community again.
Yeah, maybe.
But I do get your perspective though.
Yeah.
Because there's an evident barrier, like for example, the Arabic language. That's just a barrier whether we like it or not.
Yep. And look, I think it'll be a barrier that will essentially be gone in a generation. Like, you see everyone of a certain age speaks Arabic. You go one generation down, maybe half. I reckon, our kids, it will be quite rare to probably have someone who speaks fluent Arabic, I reckon.
I hope it's not the case, bro.
It won't be your kid, but
I hope it's not the case. I don't want the language to outright just die here.
No, hopefully not. And look, it's one of those things. Like, I'd love to learn it. I've tried learning it, but
Did you really try learning Arabic?
Yeah.
Where did you try learning it?
I tried learning on a Duolingo, and it was really helpful to. I was at a point one day where I could look at the mass slide, and I could read the letters, and I could phonetically sound out what the word was.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Based on the letters.
Yeah.
Had no idea what the word meant.
Yeah.
But I was at the point I could phonetically work out. I could say what that word was there. I'd have no idea what I was saying, but I could say that word based on the Arabic writing.
Yeah.
Because the way that I was, at least at the stage that I was with it, super duper phonetic. Like the way that the letters are, it's so phonetic.
Yes.
It's not like English where sort of different combinations of words leads to different things. It's like, it's very phonetic. It's like, bing, bang, boom, and that's each, yeah.
That's what I like about Arabic. It is very, once you at least get the letters, and you can also they call them haraket, the lines, essentially the symbols.
Yeah.
Once you get that, you know how to pronounce the word.
Yeah.
Because it's not like there's letter combinations like C and H can mean different variations, different words and so forth.
So,
That's
yeah,
all.
we'll get there. Hopefully, inshallah. If I marry an Arabic girl, I'll probably have to learn.
Please God. Now, let's get into. Was there? I don't know if I don't remember if I asked you this last time. Was there a specific moment where you said, "That's it. I'm moving towards baptism now"?
No, I don't think there was a specific moment. I think it was just like a real gradual point. I couldn't point to a specific moment. You know, it wasn't like the sort of eureka moment with what's his face in the bath? What's that guy? The scientist who?
Einstein?
No, the displacement
No, it was
guy.
the other one. It was the.
Someone. Anyway, that bloke.
That
there
bloke
was no
that
like
said
eureka moment where
yeah.
like, hang on to go get baptized. It was more so like, it was sort of a coming of realization that if I want to fully participate in the life of the church, if I want to fully participate in the liturgy, I need to get baptized. And it was kind of getting to the point, and I think it was when I sort of thought about it, I was like, okay, what would baptism mean? What would it mean that I can't do? And I was like, well, there's no reason not to get baptized. I should get baptized. Like, I'm turning up to church every week. You know, I want to participate in the sacraments. I want to get married in a Roman Catholic way. Like, why wouldn't I go for these sacraments? I believe that God is there. I don't have any problems overall with the dogmatic teachings of the church. Fine, let's go for it. So
you didn't have a single problem with any of the dogmas?
not at that point.
Not at that point.
Not
Okay.
at that point. I'd had ones previous, and you know, there's little ones that crop up every now and then, but they're none of them are sort of faith shattering. You know, they're things where I recognise that the church has an authority, and that I have an understanding, and there's simply a gap to be bridged there.
That, you know what, and that's a very big point, because I think the fundamental dogma is the church, at least the position of the church and the position of the Pope in terms of authority. If you get that, then the rest of it kind of builds off it, because you eventually just turn around and say, the church can infallibly declare this.
Jimmy Aiken talked about it as well when he was talking about, you know, you get to a point, if you're coming from a different religious background and becoming Catholic, you get to a point where you get to an understanding that the church has authority over, you know, everything else that you've investigated so far. So that's when you can start to appreciate the magisterium.
Absolutely.
And start to appreciate, oh, okay, in this case, I can pretty much accept the church is always going to be right.
Yeah.
And that if there is something that I don't understand, the church's teaching, there is a gap to be bridged there. Now, it doesn't mean that the church is absolutely right in the text of what they've said, as we've said with the salvation outside the church. That doesn't mean exactly that. There's a lot behind that. There's a lot to that. So I think in a lot of cases, it's about just understanding, trying to fully understand the teaching and trying to reconcile that with where you're at.
Like, when you think about that dogma, there is no salvation outside of the Catholic Church. That's 8 words.
Yep.
And the amount of theology that is built in those 8 words, like, you have to understand.
It's too simple. Those 8 words are too simple.
You can't just drop them. That's exactly my point. You can't just drop the 8 words, move on as if you've got like this mic drop moment.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean the teaching is wrong. But you need to flesh out the teaching a heck of a lot more.
Right, and place it within the context as well.
Yeah.
Council of Trent, dealing with the Protestant Reformation,
Yeah.
has essentially turned around and said, these reformers have said, you just need faith.
Yeah.
We turn around and say, no, that's not how it works. We have a church. Let's build on that theology.
Yeah.
And it's just got so much to it. And that's why I don't agree with Catholics that just drop it. I don't think that that's helpful. I don't think it works. But I also don't think I appreciate the method of other people that just attempt to, what's the word I'm looking for? They almost try to avoid tackling it head on, and instead try to almost divert to a different answer altogether.
Yeah.
Like, they'll say things, as an example, like, oh, like, there's no salvation outside the Catholic Church, but, like, you know, there's invincible ignorance and all that kind of stuff. And they'll try to divert it instead of just trying to tackle on the question and say, look, this is what it means.
Yep.
However, there's also this, and this.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you're now starting the Maronite equivalent of RCIA, which is not really
Yeah,
the Maronite.
I would not even compare the two. Like, as someone who's, I've talked to the RCIA coordinator at the Diocese of Broken Bay where I work now, and like it is, oh god, it is like chalk and cheese. Like and it's a bit of a shame almost as well, because the RCIA is so beautiful, because it's not just about hey, this is what we believe. That's it. See you later. It's a rite. Like, you do a mass where the people are welcomed in as catechumens into the church, of like welcome to people who are going to discern our community, and it's beautiful because it's not just about preparing people with the knowledge. They're preparing people spiritually. They're welcoming them into the life of the parish while they're going through that rite. Like, it's designed to tick off community, spirituality, and theology.
Absolutely.
In such a beautiful way. And he's compared it to the womb of the church, the RCIA being the womb of the church, which I think is such a beautiful analogy. It's like, this is our child, and look, our child can't do much for themselves. They can't receive the sacraments. They can't do anything, but we're going to nurture this person. And it's like, it's like what we do as Catholics. We treat that as a human being. That's an intrinsic life.
Absolutely.
And the same thing as RCIA. That person is a Christian. They just so happen not to be able to do these things right now, because we're preparing them for that, so that when they are ready to receive, that they have a full understanding of what they're ready to receive.
Well, this is an important point, though. So, where do we have to improve as Maronites when it comes to that?
It's hard. A proper rite would be really good, I reckon, and like properly welcoming people as catechumens into the church. And like doing a mass and praying for that person. You know, look, I'm sure I had friends praying for me, but it would have been a really beautiful thing to get up in front of the entire congregation and say, hey, this is this person. He wants to give up his life to join our church. And for the next, whatever it is, we want everyone to pray for this person.
Yes.
And pray for them, pray for them and pray that this journey will be with them. And any way we can assist this person, let's assist this person, It was sort of really done in private and on the side, which is fine. Look, and to be honest, I probably would have been blushing my whole time if I was up on stage when all that was happening. But sort of looking as a third person, it's a really beautiful thing. And it was a really beautiful thing that the day after my baptism, when I received what would technically be my first Holy Communion, even though I wasn't dressed in the white gown and with my hands together walking up to the thing. But and it was really nice that Monsignor Shora made a point of saying, like, this is Will. He's just received for the first time. He was baptized yesterday, and like there was massive applause, and like people come up to me afterwards, and that was a really beautiful thing. And it's a really nice way to feel welcomed as well. Yeah,
I remember that mass where you actually asked me beforehand, who do I go to?
Yeah, I was like, what do I do? Yeah, I was like, do I need to go to I was like, because I was thinking, like, because this is technically the first time I'm receiving this sacrament.
Yes.
And so I was thinking, okay, sacrament, validity of sacrament. Okay, well, I probably need to go to a priest. So I was like, do I go to Monsignor? Like, do I need to go to Monsignor Shora? Can I receive it from anyone? So, yeah.
Look, technically you could have received it from anyone, but I do remember Mons calling me up. I was like, geez, what did I do? He called me up and he whispered to me, he's like, tell Will to come to me.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, that answers our questions.
But then there was the other thing of like, I'd always like, because I've been sitting there for two and a half years at that point, and I've seen all these people. I've seen a whole bunch of people going up and receiving on the tongue. I've seen a whole bunch of people going up and receiving on the hand, and that was the other big thing. It's like,
how do I go about
it? What do I do? Like, it's gonna be, it's gonna be a little bit set in stone, whatever I kind of choose to do.
Do you have an opinion when it comes to that? In terms of,
I have a personal opinion.
Yeah.
I really like to receive on the tongue.
Yeah.
I think it feels, for me, it feels a lot more reverent. It feels like, from the if we think about the priest acting in the place of Christ, it feels like from the hand of Christ to my mouth, like, and there's nothing in between, that I'm receiving him straight. Having said that, there's certainly circumstances where I do receive in the hand. If I go to a church that I've never been to before, and I'm the last one, and and all 29 people in the church or whatever it is have received in the hand before me, I'm not inclined to cause a fuss if that's not the done thing there. But I do where I can. I try and receive on the tongue, even if I'm the only. Like at work, we do mass on weekdays, and there's me and one other person who receives on the tongue out of all the people that are there. And they're all very reverend Roman Catholic people who work for the church, and I'm not going to say what is less reverent for someone else, because it's completely personal, and I don't think one of them is wrong. I don't think one of them is right. I think it's whatever you choose to do at that point. And so
that's such a fantastic answer, and that's the whole point. I think that's what it dwells down to. That By the way, is dwell a word?
Dwell.
Yeah.
No, what context are you using?
It's like
You can say delve or you can say dwell.
Yeah. Dwell. Maybe that's the word I'm actually aiming for here.
Delve.
Because I do remember
when you delve into something, you're digging into it.
Yeah.
If you dwell with something, you're sitting with it.
Wait, what was the first word you?
Delve.
Delve.
Not
That's
dwell.
the word I'm looking. Yeah, dwell. Because delve. So I tried to spell dwell once, and it kept coming up as wrong. And I was thinking, man, what's wrong? It's a word. And so it's delve. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's delve. There's no dwell.
Yeah. I'm learning something new every day. So that's what I think it delves down to.
Yes. I'd say boils down to.
Yeah, it boils
that's
down
a
to.
much better.
Same thing. It's a lot of time it gets conflated, and people make a really big fuss of it. But fundamentally, the church turned around and said, you can receive it on the hand. And as long as you do it reverently, believe me, I remember Mons once responded back with this against somebody who was essentially saying, no, we shouldn't receive it on the hand. And he did rightfully say, I've witnessed people receiving it irreverently, even on the tongue. So, like, it's like define reverence. Where in the definition of reverence does it say you have to receive it on the tongue? That's the thing.
An abuse of one thing does not make something illegitimate. Just because someone, when it is in the hand, can then take it, grasp it, put it in their pocket, take it out, eat it later. It doesn't mean there's anything intrinsically wrong with the way that they've chosen to receive. Yes. In the same way that like someone could keep it in their mouth and go and take it. It doesn't change anything. All that matters is how you're receiving it in your heart and in your mind, I think that's something that I definitely I'd catch myself because, for the first few months of receiving the Eucharist, for someone who was sitting on the sidelines for 2.5 years, it meant a lot to me every single time I got to receive it. But I realized after a few months I was getting complacent. And then, there was one time I just sort of went and received, went, sat back down. And like 5 minutes later, caught myself. It was like, I just went through the motions there. Yeah. And I literally just went through the motions. Walk up, I'm going to take this thing, I'm going to put it in my mouth, I'm going to go back and sit down. I'm going to try and look reverent while I do it because everyone's looking at me. I was like, I didn't even realize in that moment, I just didn't even think about what I was doing. I didn't think about receiving. I didn't think about the sacrifice. I didn't think about all these things, you know? And so I think that's something we can really get, I could be in that, and I received by the tongue. And there would have been people in that room who were being far more reverent than me in that moment and fully understanding what they were receiving in that moment. Absolutely. Who received by the hand. And 100% they were more reverent and more right than I am in that situation.
It's like you're receiving the body and blood, soul and divinity of Jesus Christ. Like, it's such a humongous deal. And anyways, that's a topic for another day. Let's get to another point. So, during the process of learning about the Catholic faith, was there a dogma that troubled you?
Yeah, I mean the anything to do with Mary is really hard to get your head around. Anything to do with the saints is really hard to get your head around. I hadn't had a very well formed formation during high school on specific theological stuff. But anytime you're sort of dealing with a generalist or Protestant view of things, it's hard to understand praying to saints. It's hard to understand Mary and all those things because my relationship with God had always been cultivated as with God, with Jesus, with the Holy Spirit, but not with an intermediary. And when you go to the Pentecostal churches, people can pray over you. I didn't like it when people prayed for me. So I didn't like. Who are you? Exactly. I didn't like it when strangers prayed for me. So why would I feel any sort of particular affinity to a stranger that died 800 years ago praying for me? In the sense of the saints. So that was something for me. They were definitely things that I had to sort of overcome. I'd say with Mary, I'm still not 100% there. I do struggle to pray to Mary, to ask for her intercession. The rosary isn't a particular favourite of mine. I don't really feel much of a connection to the rosary. And
to be fair, that's okay.
Yeah, and that's what I say to everyone. I mean, people would. I saw something online about like if you're a good Catholic, if you pray the rosary every day, it's like you can be the best Catholic in the world and not pray the rosary once in your life. The rosary has nothing to do with being a good Catholic. It's a common devotion but it's not at every devotion. You know, we don't say it during Mass. There's no requirement to say it. And I think that, you know, there's definitely people who love the Rosary. There's people who think it's the bee's knees.
Absolutely.
And it's beautiful. And it's like, I can recognize it as a beautiful devotion. It's just something that doesn't necessarily speak to my heart in the same way I see it speaks to other people's hearts.
Prayer is personal. You're having a chat, in a very basic level at least, you're having a conversation with God. You can't tell somebody, this is how you have a conversation.
Yeah.
All right, there are basics. Yes, there are frameworks. It makes perfect sense. But you can't say you have to pray the rosary.
No.
You just can't. Yeah.
And ordered prayer is good. Like, you know, my nighttime prayer always starts with Our Father. I really like the Our Father. Like, I'm a big fan of the Lord's Prayer. You know, and it helps me get in that zone as well, and helps me, you know, it helps me get there. And that's the one that Jesus said, hey, do this one. You know, he didn't say to pray the rosary. He said, do this one. And the Our Father is the one we say it during Mass. You know, like that's a really important one. And I have a really strong affinity to that one. But yeah, so Mary's been a tricky one. I think reading Tim Staples' book, Behold Your Mother.
Cracker book. Yeah.
Great book. And just because more than anything, and I think it's a book that any Protestant should read, because I think that I think for a lot of Protestants there is a desire to see Mary as being really important, but I think that it can sometimes be suppressed because they think that's too Catholic. Like, I can't do that. I can't think of her as being special. And it's like, you don't have to venerate her in the same way that we as Catholics do. But this is the one person who is worthy to carry
God.
Carry God.
Yeah. You can't undermine that. Absolutely.
Like, you know, that you read in the Old Testament, these priests would have to be so pure and clean to even gaze upon God. Absolutely. In the temple, let alone be the temple, you know. And I think that it's quite extraordinary, and that is something that has really helped me. And I think that that's what his book is really beautiful. It's like it's not saying, look, you don't have to pray to her, and you know, this might not be the way, but let's look at how important she is, and let's look at what she was, you know, just based on biblical evidence, you know, not even going outside of that. And it's a really beautiful book, and it's definitely helped me a lot. Yeah,
look, I do think, and mind you, it's not just the thing that you have. There's countless of people that always just have this very basic question: why do I need to ask or pray to a saint when I can just go straight to God?
Yeah,
it's such the basic and simple way, but it's amazing once you actually do a bit of reading, you can actually understand it a bit more. I actually admire how Jimmy Akin goes about it.
I was listening to him today talk about it, because he was a bit snarky with the bloke, but the guy says, like, why do I need to pray to that? And he goes, we call it, it's like Christopher or something. Okay. Christopher, can you pray for me tonight? I want you to pray. What? I just want you to pray for me tonight. Okay, can you do that for me? Yeah, sure, thank you. And everyone listening, I'd really like you to pray for me tonight. Okay. And that's how he starts it. And it's like, and it's something that I always explain to people, like, the only gap you've sort of got to overcome with praying to saints is, the only gap you've got to understand is, can they hear us? If they can hear us, that's all you got to, like, that's the only question you've got to overcome there. Because every single Protestant denomination will ask someone to pray for them. And it might be someone who isn't even closer to God than they are, you know, but they'll just ask, because I think that they recognize that the pleas of many is worthy of, you know, being raised up, and it helps. The power of prayer from multiple people helps. And so why wouldn't we, you know, give that to people who are closer to God than
that's exactly right.
Than any of us, not only in this life, but you know, temporally, is that the right word?
Yeah. I think St. James says it in his letter. I can't remember which chapter, but I don't know why chapter 5 has come to my head. But he says the prayer of the righteous is powerful and effective.
Yes, absolutely.
And can you get any more righteous than somebody who's received the beatific vision?
Yeah, exactly.
So, although I can admire you for still admitting that there's still some struggles there. Is there any particular struggle with Mary besides the whole praying to her? Like, is there anything else?
No, in fact, like I've through reading and all these things, I've come to appreciate, like, the beautiful, you know, her as being the new Ark of the Covenant.
Oh,
that's such a beautiful thing. The Mother of God, the actual Mother of God. You know, the vessel of God. All these things, and you know, I think no no Christian who seriously reads the Bible can come away thinking that Mary wasn't the most special human being to have ever lived. You just can't. You can't come away from that. And I think that you know,
can't just
I remember I was talking to a young girl, and she said, you know, I don't want to be Christian because it's too misogynistic. You know, all these men wrote the Bible and all these things like that. And it's like, well, geez, how do you handle that one? It's like, but you kind of like, and it's a hard one to explain to people as well, because on the surface you go, okay, but then you realize, okay, well, we think the greatest human being ever was a woman.
Damn.
We venerate women like there's no tomorrow, and we have for a long, long time. We didn't start this in the 1960s when everyone else did, you know, and as well as that as well, you know, it's just such a bizarre one. And it's those ones that always catch me out, like those questions of like, how the hell do you answer that? Like, it's almost such a weird objection to the faith.
It's underlyingly, it has to be a deeper wound.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. There's a yeah, absolutely.
I do think that a lot of society's problems, I don't think all, but I do think there's a lot, at least that I can think of, underlyingly comes from a lack of genuine masculine affection and love that is present in society. That now we're dealing with the wounds of a generation that didn't actually experience that genuine masculinity, which is a beautiful thing. I think it just seems to be constantly a debate. It just seems to be that feminists are saying we don't need men. Well, that's at least extreme feminists. Or certain feminists are saying it's still male dominated. And then you've got the other side, which is generally, it's not even on the defense, it's more the offense. It's, well, if you don't like men, you go to the army then. Or you go become a bricklayer. It's that kind of mentality. I just think we need to, I think Simon Carrington puts it perfectly, come back to what does it mean in God's mission to be a man, to be a woman? What does that mean? You'll find your genuine masculinity or femininity there.
Yeah. More simply than that, I think that we've had sort of this movement where women rightly realise that, you know, men can behave like pigs. Men can be obnoxious, men can be immature, absolutely. Men can be all these horrible things. And instead of women going, we demand better from these men, a lot of them said, oh, we're going to act like that as well. and now you've got you've got this horrible thing at the moment where the rates of heart disease in women is very quickly catching up to men, because they're now engaging in heavy drinking and all these different things that used to be the sort of the pursuits of men. And, you know, I've seen no better example of men being civilized than when they find a woman. Women have this gift to civilize men in the same way that men rarely bring out an equal characteristic in women. But women can do so much for men, you know.
I agree with that statement, and I can tell you a very funny experience. I never used to tuck in my chair until Giselle, whenever we used to go on a date, used to call me out for it.
There you go.
Now, I can't get up without tucking in my chair. Even if I'm only getting up to say hi to somebody, I find sometimes I'll tuck in my chair just so I did it. There's that relationship there that is evidently meant to be there.
Yeah.
We just need to discover it and learn to appreciate it for what it actually is. Yeah. And I get exactly what you mean, like this idea of we're now trying to just be each other. Yeah. That's not going to solve anything.
No, it's not. And I think that, like, I'm a man, I don't want a masculine woman, and I don't think women want feminine men. Well, that's just some do, that's fine, but I think broad scale, we don't want that, you know, and I don't think it means being misogynistic or chauvinistic or all these different things, but I think it just essentially means, you know, model what it is to be a man. And it doesn't mean you can't do things that aren't masculine. Like, I love musical theatre. I love going to see plays and things like that. My sister loves going to the footy. You know, when we go to Melbourne as a family, I used to go with mum. We'd go watch a play, or we'd go watch a musical, and my sister would go with dad and watch the footy. You know, like, and it was, and it's like, you know, you can embody those things, but that doesn't. You know, I think that what especially with, we're talking about gender a lot, so all these days and things like that someone would point to that and say that how somehow made me less of a man, made me less of, you know, male, because I indulged in something that is typically feminine. Well, no, that makes no sense at all. Like it doesn't take away from my masculinity enjoying something that is, maybe broadly enjoyed by women. And I think that we really need to, defend masculinity while embracing that masculinity isn't this one thing, it's not being the macho man. And
look, you'll find that innately at the end of the day, nature does do its thing. Like little boys will naturally be little boys. So they'll just go ahead and do that stuff. But yeah, you're right. Like sometimes we can almost overly panic.
Yeah.
A man can definitely go and watch a musical play. That's okay.
Good.
That's fine.
Even if it's, I've seen some interesting musicals in my time. I went along to Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. That was a very interesting. I went to the premiere of that, and there was all these drag queens around. And I was like, oh my god, what have I got myself into? And look, it was a really good show, but at the same time, I was like, oh goodness gracious me, I don't know about this.
Oh, dude, you know what? I went to year 12.
Yeah.
So I did drama in high school.
Me too.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
I remember finding this out. I think I found this out through Joseph Weeby.
Oh, yes.
Because I think you guys did drama together, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was in the grade below me, but Joseph was always Jesus. And I remember...
Were you like always Pontius Pilate or something?
One year I was Pontius Pilate.
Yeah, I get
so
that.
for the Easter one. And then a couple months later, we did the Good Samaritan play, and I was Jesus. So I was very conflicted. I was just like, actually, I'll tell you a funny story when we first got locked down. But before that, I used to do drama, and we went to go see the major, so the Year 12 majors.
Yep.
We from the year before.
We
went to go see them.
Yeah, we did the same. Yeah.
You know, the final act was an outright comedy on the Holy Family.
Oh my gosh.
An outright comedy. Like it was and you should have heard the reaction of my teacher. Like he was about to flip it. He was about to lose it. And I was just thinking, man, you've invited Catholic schools to this thing.
It's pretty brave.
And you're doing that, man. God bless.
what were they doing? Like, what was it? Was it kind of taking the piss a little bit?
Oh yeah, yeah. It was absolutely taking. There were some things that they were doing. Look, I wasn't that like stern on the faith.
Yeah.
But looking back at it now, they pushed a lot of barriers.
Oh gosh.
Especially considering that a lot of Catholic schools were there. Like they really should have factored that in.
Yeah. No, I don't think about that.
Is that really appropriate at that time?
Yeah, no.
Is it ever appropriate? But anyways, we can get to that some other time. Anyways, lockdown. When we first got locked down, so when COVID was here, it was during Holy Week. So we weren't live streaming. We were recording our Holy Week masses. And for whatever reason, we did things in reverse. So we did Palm Sunday first, then we did Easter, and then we did Good Friday before it was Great Friday. So I remember being very conflicted because it's like he's come into Jerusalem, he's resurrected, and then we've killed him. I was just sitting back thinking, man, what the heck is actually going on here? Yeah.
I think if it's going to make you feel better, they do when they film the Mass at Home. It's a series that they have every Sunday morning for people who are at home, and it's like 6 a.m. in the morning. I do believe that they film them all at once for the entire year in January.
Wow.
Yeah. So, which it clicked the other day because I was watching one and I was like, I know that priest is not in Sydney right now, and yet he's doing mass, and I'm like, I know for a fact he is elsewhere. So yeah. So it's fine. I do think it's a bit odd liturgically
But look, you have to factor in as well. This is like the first time, at least the church in the modern era, had to deal with something like that. So I think we were still trying to find our feet. We were still trying to figure out what do we do with this. Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next bit. So you're not baptized, and I had the privilege of being at your baptism.
Yes.
Fantastic. And I remember this was just coming out of lockdown as well.
Yeah, it was like, I think we got two weeks before, if you were double vaxxed, you're allowed out. Like 2 weeks before. And that date had been set in stone from the start of the year before we even were thinking about lockdown. Like it was set in stone when we weren't thinking that there was ever going to be another lockdown.
Yeah.
I think that was kind of the attitude. And I remember it was really, I had so many thoughts during that time of like, what do I do? If I have the opportunity to be baptized, just me, do I do it?
Do I take it? Yeah.
Do I take it? Or do I wait? And so that I can, make it special, make it memorable, make it all these different things. And so thankfully I didn't have to make that decision, because I don't think I ever came down on what I would have done.
Yeah.
Because I think I know that getting baptized would have had no sacramental point at that point. Like if no one can come to the baptism, I can't go to mass. I can't I can't do anything with it. So there's no point to it. We know that catechumens are considered Christian in the fact that that them being spared from baptism is not them being spared from salvation.
Yep.
That is just simply that they just haven't had an opportunity to access that sacrament yet. I was kind of sitting there going, well, there's no reason to do it imminently necessarily. But yeah, as I said, I didn't have to make the decision, and thankfully I got to have 70, 80 people there, and then churches were the place where you could have anyone. It didn't matter about being vaccinated or not. So I got to have everyone I wanted to have there, and it was beautiful. And my parents were there, and they my mum, my dad, and my sister, and all of them had tears in their eyes.
I do remember that, and I remember. I think you mentioned it once. You were like, your parents probably didn't know what was actually going on.
Yeah, I don't think. It's not that I don't think. They do not understand what is going on sacramentally. They just would not understand what is going on sacramentally. They would probably understand on the surface of it that I'm devoting my life to God. But I don't think they necessarily understood, everything that came along with it, how important that sacrament was, that it was a rebirth, that I am like, all these different things. But all of them had tears in their eyes, including my sister, who is, she's quite ardently against the faith. Not in a way that's mean or malicious, but just in a way that she has never felt that connection. She's never been given that hand and that grace. And I sort of use that language because I feel blessed that I was given that, because there's just some people who, they are, and she has a hardened heart in the most beautiful way, that it's a heart that will protect her, from people who try and sell her something bogus or try and, woo her or something like that. She's got a beautiful hardened heart that protects her. But it also means that it's a hard shell for some other things. And so, yeah, but she had tears in her eyes, and she said to my mum, she said, I don't understand what's going on, but I know how important this is,
Does that just prove then that the sacraments, and this is an important part of our theology, it's not just a ceremony, it's real. Like there's something actually happening.
Yeah, I think that's it as well. Like there has to be a witness to something there. Either they've got to see in me a deep devotion, which is coming from somewhere. I think they've seen obviously a commitment there, and they've seen something there, and I can't speak to what that is. And I just hope that that's a little seed that is planted in them.
Yeah,
and it's a hard one. Like my faith journey has been lonely in a lot of ways, unfortunately. I rock up to mass and I see people there with their brothers, with their sisters, with their cousins, with their parents, with their spouses, with their kids, all these different things, and it's always just me. I've never had anyone come along. I've never had a brother or a sister or a relative come along with me to mass. So, and I think that was something I really felt when I wasn't baptized, because everyone else was going up and I had to stay where I was, and that felt even more isolating. And I can say that I think that has really drifted away since being baptized. And I can't speak to what it was, but I think there's a feeling that I am properly united. That I am in communion with all these people. The other thing I'll say about baptism as well, that they, I remember I was listening to a lot of things, and they were saying, like, don't expect it's going to be a magic light whereby, you're baptized today and then tomorrow you're going to be perfect.
Yeah.
You're going to be good, you're going to see the light and everything like that. I got to say though, my discernment of right or wrong became a lot stronger though, and I sort of felt a real tug, which I'd call the Holy Spirit in the sense of the Paraclete, the one guiding me, where like little things that I would normally have just let myself slip on, I'd suddenly feel myself go, "Oi, don't do that."
Yes.
And that was a real tangible thing that I could sort of feel post baptism.
Yes.
When there's not necessarily a lot of other things that I could point to and say that's how I felt this different after baptism.
Yeah, and this is such an important point because it's so important that we don't just always refer to the theology.
Yeah.
In the sense that it's always just about the abstract and the concepts. It's real. Yeah. There's a real experience there.
Absolutely.
Which is why I can admire like certain groups that do cop a bit of flack, like the charismatic groups, for example.
Yeah.
That do intend for that real experience. Like that's what they're focusing on, that real experience. I can admire that. Although at the same time, if Deacon Joe is listening, there is always room for theology. To be the thing. There always room is. Okay. Has there been anything that shocked you since your baptism? About Catholics, about the church, about anything in general? Because I'm
trying to think. Shock's a bad word. Surprising?
Yeah, surprising maybe, yeah.
Surprising how good confession is.
Oh, okay.
I was so nervous. I'm so scared about confession. That was the part that I was looking forward to the least. There was one thing that was going to stop me from getting baptized. It would be confession. It's like I'm now compelled to tell, a stranger on the other side of a door everything I've done wrong at least once a year. That was like, oh my gosh. And I remember I was so nervous for my first confession, and it was about 4 weeks after I was baptized. I went for my first confession, and I went in there and I sat down. And it was a Buna Yusuf, and it was it's in that little room where you're face to face with the priest, like
where he's got the eyes closed the whole time.
We'll come back to that. Anyway, I remember I was like, okay, and I talked to all these people. I'm like, you need to give me the toolkit of what to like. How do I do this? Like, what do I do? What do I say? And I had some friends who guided it through me really, really well. And then they say, don't worry. There's a piece of paper in there that says everything that you need to say, and all you need to worry about is your sins. That's all you need to worry about. And I was like, cool. So I go in there, and the first line is, bless me, Father, for I've sinned. It has been time since my last confession. And I'm sort of I'm verbalizing out loud as I'm thinking through it. And I'm like, it's been, I got baptized 4 weeks ago. That's not really confession. So it's kind of, it's kind of been 4 weeks, but it hasn't been 4 weeks. So I sort of said this, and I can just imagine poor old Yusuf being there, like, just get on with it. Like, it doesn't matter, So, and then I went and did it, and I just remember how, like, relieved I felt afterwards. Like, it felt so good. And I still have it now where, like, I get nervous beforehand, and, like, there's times where I really, unfortunately, I do put it off. I put off going to confession, but every single time afterwards, I'm like, oh, that felt so good,
Oh, it's awesome.
It's really hard to explain to people. But I've had even Protestant friends who've said, like, they're like, we need something like that. And that not necessarily to a priest, but one of them said, we need to really understand what it says when you say confess your sins to one another.
Yeah.
Because she said, we don't do that. And we obviously need, it's in scripture. We need to do it, So, and I think there's beautiful sanctity from that. You mentioned having your eyes, Buna Yusuf, having your eyes closed. I hope this isn't breaking the sacrament of confession by talking about what happened. I'm not going to talk about any specific sin.
As long as,
I think this is fine. But we're there, and I'm sort of, every single time I've ever gone in, and he always has eyes down. He doesn't look at you, eyes closed, looking down. And so I tend to do the same. That after I've said my things, I sort of look down reverently and all these different things, and sort of try and take in what he's saying. And it was about the fourth or fifth time, and I remember I slightly glanced up, and he's staring right at me as he's talking with me. I'm like, oh, okay, it's one of these ones. So I'm suddenly like looking up, and like he's talking directly at me.
Yes.
And he's only ever done it this once. And I still don't know why. I have a hunch that it was because there'd been the sort of same. There'd been a pattern of things that had been the same. I was kind of going for the same thing every single time. And I reckon he said, "Okay, listen here. This we're going to do this right." But yeah, so it's been quite funny. But yeah, I got to say, like that was the most surprising thing and it's been really nice.
There's a certain intensity when you confess face to face. There is a certain intensity there. I
really like it. My best confession has been with Monsignor Shura, and we literally had, almost like this conversation, and really talk through some things. And it's the best way to do it with a priest that you know well, and a priest who can understand you and talk you through it. That's and it's not every time. I wouldn't want to do that every time I do confession. It's sometimes really into, it sounds bad, but it's really good to sometimes just do the down and dirty. Like, I know I've done wrong. I know what I need to change here. I just need to go and get the, if we have to spend half an hour talking about this, I'm going to get annoyed. I know what I need to do. I just need to go and I need to,
start fresh. Yes,
I need to start afresh. So go to the priest, this is everything. So, and you sort of pick where you go for confession, and like, I don't like to do it too often at CTR, but I do it a few times there. But then I like to go to other places as well, like St. Bernadette's in Dundas. The priests there are so fire and brimstone with their homilies, but you've never had a more beautiful confession. Like they're so pastoral. Every time you just hear, that was a beautiful confession, my brother. And I'm like, oh, thank you.
I have this thing that if a new priest rocks up, I always get confession with them. I'm just always intrigued at experiencing the sacrament with different priests, seeing their styles. And it's so amazing to see their personalities come out during the sacrament.
Yeah, I'm a bit wary sometimes of like trying new priests. Like, you hear bad stories. I heard one story of a girl who she'd been for about 3 years, and the priest went off it. And it's really funny, but at the same time as well, like if someone's been away for that long, you want to make sure that that's a really positive experience. And that's the experience that I've really had. But, she sort of walked away from that going, well, geez, I'm not going to do that again for a while, and that's not good, and it should be, Father Mike Smith has talked about it, making it a really welcoming place to be. And this is, we literally have a whole, parable for this.
Yeah.
The
prodigal son.
The prodigal son, coming home and being welcomed and come back, and like all these different things. Not the father going, you've been away for so long, you've done all these things, like that is confession in a parable.
Although, can I also say, I think there is always room to get smashed every once in a while.
Do you know who needs that though? The blokes. Women don't react well to that. There's a American sports coach who was talking about he's coached men's teams and he's coached women's teams. And if you go in at halftime and the team's losing with the women, you got to really try and build them up. You got to really be really gentle with them and really talk them through. That's your access point. He said with the men, you get in there, you yell, you throw shit, and they get fired up, and they know, they get G'd up, And so I think that's sort of a pastoral thing. I think men really respond well to getting to essentially being kicked up the butt, to be really hammered by something and really challenged by something. And look, some women would as well, but I think generally speaking, that's a sort of key difference.
Yeah, and that's where I think confession is definitely, like, you can definitely tell with the experienced priests with a few confessions under their belt how they tend to pick that up quite easily. Like, what does this person need at this time? How do you nurture them?
Exactly.
Okay, it's good to hear that confession was one of the good joyful bits.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's been like a negative surprise at all.
Look, it's good that you don't necessarily have negative surprises. I guess the only thing that I was really thinking about was finally officially being part of the community. And you've got that, and every newly baptized person has this, like, there's just this fire. I was just wondering if sometimes you interact with other Catholics that don't even have that fire, that just seem so lackadaisical, if that's almost like underwhelming.
I wouldn't say it's underwhelming. I think everyone's sort of at their own place spiritually in a lot of ways. And I can talk to people who may have really quite strong theological disagreements with me, and sort of even against things that are quite firmly against church teaching. But I can also see in them that they've got a real zeal, they've got a real hunger. So I was chatting to one person, and they took all these things that like they say are wrong with the church, and like I just can't agree with this teaching. I just can't agree with this teaching. I said to them as well. I said to them, like, you could go find a church that would affirm all these things you believe. Why don't you go and do that? And she said, because I recognize how important the sacraments are. And that was a beautiful thing to hear. And that was like, and so, you know, as much as I can disagree with someone on a theological level, like, it's so beautiful to hear that, you know, and that speaks to a real heart for the church, you know, and I think that's a differentiation as well. Like, their heart is there for the church. Their head isn't there yet, but their heart is there. And you know, I think we always say that the heart can really lead the head in a beautiful way, and vice versa. But
yeah, it's like the times John 6 when Christ talks about you have to eat my flesh and drink my blood, and all the people walk away because they find the teaching so hard, and he looks at the apostles and he says, "Are you going to walk away too?" And I love St. Peter's response. It's, where else are we to go, Lord?
Yeah.
Like, he's not even saying, I understand, I fathom it. He just knows. He's seeing Christ and he just knows who he is, and he's having trust in that. And that's kind of the same response. Look, I'm gonna be completely honest. There would be times where, not that I've ever thought about walking away from the faith, but sometimes that people within the church just tick me off, where I just think, what's the point of sticking around here any longer, right? But it's the reassurance, knowing that, okay, this is Christ's body, and at the same time, he never promised us we're going to have an easy time. That's for sure.
But it's really beautiful as well. I think, and I think, you know, that goes to it. Like, we have the body and blood of Christ.
Oh man.
And you know, I was thinking about the other day. Someone must have said something about it because it sparked this thought in me. If Hillsong turned off the music for a year, there'd be no one left. By the end, maybe a handful of people, but there'd essentially be no one left. You know, and so you go, what is the substance of what is going on here? You know, if the music is the defining factor for most people, why are they there? You know, and I think that's a beautiful thing about our Mass. Is that our Mass is entirely ordered towards that, the body and blood of Christ.
Wow.
And so we can strip out a lot of elements and it's still there. You know, there are a lot of churches that have got rid of the music, but still people still turn up. You know, they've gotten rid of a lot of they got rid of the incense, they've gotten rid of the beautiful, you know, it's in a shack somewhere and there's, you know, they press play on the Casio player to listen to the hymns or something like that. There's people still there because none of that stuff is beautiful. I like that stuff. I have a preference for when there is that stuff there. Yeah. But at the end of the day, like, it doesn't matter towards what the Mass is ordered towards.
That's inspirational, bro.
And I think that's why we're Catholic, because we recognise that there is, you know, something there that no one else can give us. And then the moments where we have those doubts, those moments where we can't understand, but, you know, Jesus is here. So why would I be anywhere else?
Man, that's inspiration. Can I just ask you, with ending it, by telling everybody what your favourite church teaching is? Because I still laugh at
It's my favourite. I love it. It's my favourite church. So when you're excommunicated, it does not remove your Sunday obligation. You can get excommunicated, so you say you're not allowed to participate in the sacramental life of the church, but see you next Sunday. Like, it's so good. It's so good. Like, you literally cannot stop being Catholic. Like, it's one of those things that we talked about before as well, like priesthood. You can't just stop being a priest. You can stop performing the rites. You can be banned from performing the rites, but you're always a priest. You know, and it's kind of great that there's a real you know, infiniteness to our faith as well. It's like I can't do anything to stop being Catholic. Because excommunication is the highest form of censoring. Yeah. And I'm still required to go to church every Sunday. You know?
I love that teaching.
It's great. It's the best.
That's an awesome teaching, bro.
Yeah.
Actually, I'll ask you one last thing
Go
because
for
I've asked everybody this.
Bro, I'm
that's
happy to
been
keep going forever. I'm in no rush.
on. Can you believe that? I can't believe how long we've actually been on for.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Anyways, that's okay. I've asked Monsignor and I've asked Father Tony this. It's become one of my favorite questions.
Okay.
If you were to become Pope,
Hmm.
whenever, doesn't remember, what would you do? What would you change? What would you implement? What would be the first thing?
I mean, based on what's currently happening, I'd sort of reinstate what Pope Benedict was talking about with the traditional Latin Mass. I'd really give people the power to do that because I think it's a really important thing for some people, obviously. Not for me, but for some people, obviously, and I could recognise that. I think I would try and model myself after John Paul II, who just revived the young people in the church.
Absolutely.
You know, and I think that is important, and whatever I could do as Pope to revive young people and not appease some of the older people. I don't know. I feel that there's been some things like, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Laudato Si. Like, people have gone bananas for Laudato Si, as if it's the best thing that's ever happened to the church. And it's like, it's got nothing to do with, it's, it's sort of a very little importance, I feel. And that I feel that if people are getting excited over Laudato Si, we've lost track of what we should get excited about. Like, care for our common home is really good, and it's important to care for creation. That's really important, but that is second to loving God, and we need to get back to that first. And I think that's we need to, whatever I could do as Pope, it would be try and order people to love God first, and that would even be well-formed Catholics. I heard, I love watching the Journey Home program on EWTN because there's a lot of people who I really resonate with, people who have come from either a atheist, agnostic or Protestant upbringing who found the Catholic Church. And I love hearing their stories because I can identify something with everyone because I've been on that path. But this guy was saying that so many Catholics who, we form them so well, but we never actually got them to fall in love with God. They never actually had that relationship. And I think that's a really important thing.
That's
and
heavy, man.
I know people can get pessimistic over our church and where it's going. I'm actually really excited because I see all the young people who are involved with the church. And I think that young people in general have a real zeal for the faith. And they're not just doing it because their parents, I think in this generation, if you don't want to go to church, you're not going to church. No one's forcing you. And I think there's a real good revival going on. There's so many good priests coming through. My goodness, there's so many good priests coming through. We've got, we might struggle with some good bishops for a little bit. We're sort of, we're getting close to the end of the line as to maybe good priests who are sort of in that 40, 50, 60 age who can now step up to be bishops. But my goodness, just you wait 20 or 30 years and we're going to light the world on fire.
Yes.
That's so good.
Mate, that's an inspirational message because there's a lot of people that are concerned.
Yeah, I think there's reason to be hopeful. And the brother at work said to me as well, he said, doesn't matter, like the importance of the Catholic Church is not based on numbers. There could be 2 people in the Catholic Church and it would still be more important than anything else in the world. And we've got to remember that as well. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to evangelize people. But it also means that our worth is not based on how many people are turning up in the pews every week,
That's absolutely true.
Actually, I've got to mention this. That mass we had the other week when it was just you, me and Monsignor Shora.
Oh, mate, that was brilliant, wasn't it?
It's the best mass I've ever had. Not because of what it was, but because what it did here. Because I sat there and realised I don't need to be here and Stefan doesn't need to be there. And that does not diminish the importance of that Mass. If Monsignor Shore is there by himself and he does Mass, it doesn't diminish the importance of the Mass. And if he turns up at a 6 p.m. Mass and no one else turns up, he will still perform the Mass, I assume. Because it doesn't matter if there's an audience, because we're not just an audience, we're participating in it. And, you know, if Hillsong goes and does their concert and no one turns up, they're not doing the concert, you know. But we still do the right. We'll still do the mass. We'll do the mass no matter who's there.
That was a bloody deep way of... Man, that was really...
I had that realization during that mass. I was like, this is beautiful. And it made me realize that it does not matter how many people are in the pews whatsoever, because it doesn't diminish Christ's sacrifice. It doesn't diminish the sacrament at all, you know.
I agree with you 100%, because one of my favorite masses was actually during the lockdown when I was still able to help.
Yeah.
And Father Yusuf, it was during our feast week, virtual feast week celebrations.
Yeah.
And Father Yusuf was saying mass, and John Latouf, Jono's grandfather, was singing. And mate, just being in between those two, that was a different experience.
I want a one mass. That's what I want. That's my goal. I want a one-on-one mass, and I think that I'll be happy.
Make sure you come to mass this Friday before the men's gathering.
Is it going to be one-on-one? Is it?
No,
Not
it
many
won't be
people.
one-on-one, but it'll at least be a men's mass, which is always a great thing.
Good.
William,
Excellent.
it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Can you send us off with a bit of a prayer?
I can. Oh, I've got to get up in my prayerful pose.
Yes, please.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Dear Lord, thank you for this chance to gather, to talk about you, to share my testimony. We pray that those listening can get something out of it, that they'll be inspired or learn something or just be encouraged to strengthen their relationship with you, Lord. We thank you that we can worship you, that we can talk about you with safety and with love. And we just hope for everyone that they can continue to search for you, continue to find you, and continue to fall in love with you. St. Francis of Assisi,
Pray for us.
in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Do we mention it was his feast day?
Yeah,
It might be a bit random. I don't have particular.
God bless all.